Hey man, if you don't mind me asking, I've been curious. Why do you keep buying handhelds? What? These things, these retro emulation handhelds. You have tons of them and you play all the same games on all of them, so why do you need so many? Well, I don't know. I think it's like you have more than one shirt, so why do you have more than one shirt? Probably for variety, right? But you wear the same shirt every day, though. Yeah, that's true. So, the handhelds. Why? Because I'm addicted, alright? Oh, really? Yes, I can't stop. Oh, I'm sorry, man. Do you need help? Yes! Oh my god, save me from this madness. It's okay. It's okay. We'll get you some help. I just want to be normal. Can we also help you with the shirt thing? No! Hey there, how's it going? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. If you had told me back in 2022 that by mid-2025 we'd be living in floating jets in sky cities, I would have believed you. I am pretty gullible. But you'd have been wrong, and I'd look like a dweeb for believing you. If you had also told me that we'd have a plethora of awesome flippy screen retro handhelds by now, I'd believe that too. And you'd have been right there. And I'd still probably feel like a dweeb. Not that you said that, this is all hypothetical, you're imaginary, but the flippy handheld's very real, and there's a new one. And that makes me happy because I love these flippy things. Why? Well, thanks for asking, voice in my head. Reason 1, the GBA SP is one of my favorite all-time handhelds. Reason 2, they're portable, protected, and perfectly pocketable, like a brownie, that you can play Advance Wars on. Reason 3, I just think they're neat. They're just fun. In a world of handhelds that are all shaped like Game Boys and PSPs trying to out-cool each other, the flippy screen doodads are off being weirdos, doing their own weird thing. And that really resonates with me for some reason. For a while, we didn't have many flippers. The Pow Kitty V90 was a fun little champ, but kinda janky. And then we had some Android things which culminated in the Retroid Flip, and those were cool, but they were more similar to a Nintendo DS than a GBA SP. And then the Amberlic RG35XX-SP, which I loved, and then the MEEEEEEE Flip, which I loved even more, specifically because it's a little bit smaller and lighter and closer in size to the original GBA SP. Now Amberlic is back with the RG34XX-SP to steal some of the thunder from the MEEEEEEE Flip. It's basically the same size and shape as the MEEEEEEE Flip, but now with a 3.4-inch 3:2 ratio screen, which is obviously amazing for GBA. And now, suddenly, it feels like we've gone from barely any to maybe too many flippy options in like a year. It's like going from a restaurant with only one thing that you want to eat on the menu to a buffet where you like everything, but there's only so much room on your plate. Is there room on your plate for the RG34XX-SP though? Well, maybe. Probably. Yes, actually. Yeah, there is. Let's be real. But first things first, this is a new XX device, which means that Amberlic is back with their letter and number jumble naming convention. Hey, nice RG34XX-SP you got there, buddy. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. So I like to name these things with better names. I won't go over the history of all the amazing zazzy names that I came up with for these things, but the last flippy screen doodad was the Flip Zizzle, and this one is barely any different, so I've decided that hence here forthwith, the RG34XX-SP will be known as the Flap Zizzle. You got the Flip Zizzle over here, and the Flap Zizzle over here. Way less confusing and way more easy to remember. Yes it is, don't argue. Up here we got our screen, got a hinge down here, and a menu button, D-pad over here, face buttons, dual analog sticks, start and select, and a single front-facing speaker. On the left we have volume up and down and a micro SD card hole. On the right we got a power button and a reset button and another SD card hole, headphone hole on the bottom, and up top we got bumpers and triggers and a USB-C hole for charging and OTG connection, and an HDMI hole for video out. Amberlic sent me 2 Flap Zizzles. I have the SNES Retro colorway here, and this one here is Indigo, which I think is supposed to feel sorta GameCube-ish. Of these 2 that I have, I much prefer the SNES colorway. I think this looks awesome, but obviously I wish they did a Game Boy DMG style colorway. But, okay, let's talk about this. Amberlick came out with the Flip Zizzle, and then Miyoo came out with their Flippy thing. It was a different size, and they did different visual aesthetic touches, like the way they did their buttons and this ribbing on the back. I thought the Miyoo Flip was slick and stylish, but now Amberlick, for their Flap Zizzle, they let's say were inspired by the aesthetics of the Miyoo Flip. Like really, really inspired. Right down to the stylish ribbing on the back. Same exact size and shape, and in some ways I'm like, aw, Amberlick copied them. And in another way I'm like, yay, Amberlick copied them. Because the Miyoo Flip was good. I liked it. And now there's another device that's nice in the same way. The one thing holding back the aesthetics here is something that a lot of people complained about when we first got our eyes on this, and rightly so in my opinion. It's this huge honking bit of plastic up here, up top. Just too much forehead. But in real life, I was relieved when I opened this and I got it in my hands and I saw it with my eyes, because I don't hate it. I mean, we like thin bezels. I think everyone can agree on that, but I don't think the device would have been all that comfortable if it was shorter to make the whole device fit better with a 3:2 ratio screen. That said, there is two things I do think they should have done. The first is to make the thicker part, this forehead, that should have been on the bottom, sort of like the original GBA SP with the bezel with the system logo on it. And the other misstep is that they could have done a two-tone bezel here instead of just one color. I did this quick mock-up and I think this looks a lot better personally. The good news is that this might actually be able for us to fix. All we need is some seller on Etsy to make a good quality sticker bezel or something to put on this. It'll be a bit awkward because it's kind of angled here, but I bet we'll get something to improve this. As for the controls on the Flap Zizzle, you're gonna kind of get what you expect from an Amberlick XX device. Bumpers and triggers and D-pad and buttons are all clicky micro switch style, and they're pretty quiet, but they're a little bit louder than the Flip Zizzle and a good bit louder than the Miyoo Flip. Nothing terrible or anything, but definitely not silent. The D-pad isn't any bigger than the Flip Zizzle, but it's a different shape, sort of halfway between the thin one on the Miyoo Flip and the thick one on the Flip Zizzle. The input quality is dang near perfect. It's clicky and firm, so that means you won't get any false diagonals, but the diagonals are easy to hit when you want to, and it's great for fighting games. And like most XX devices, the sticks kinda suck. They're small little nubs, not much range of movement, not very comfortable to use in the position they're in, and they have cardinal snapping, of course. I don't have a huge problem with them. They work, I use them, but they're not like good thumbsticks. They're just sort of there. There's two main things that I want to talk about with the screen, and that's the hinge and the screen itself. Let's start with the hinge because that's easy. The hinge on the Flap Zizzle is basically the exact same hinge as it is on the Flip Zizzle. Same dual hinge design, same shape, same smooth motion, same 120-degree angle. The Miyoo Flip did this a bit better. I actually prefer the feel of the hinge on the Miyoo Flip, even though most people don't. And I like the other angle options that we get there, but lots of people had problems with the hinge on the Miyoo Flip, and I don't think I've heard of anyone having problem with their flippy screen on the Flip Zizzle. We get the same screen on here as we get on the RG34XX, the original GBA shaped doodad, and I loved it there, but honestly, I love it even more on the Flap Zizzle. When I fired up Advance Wars, it was like being slapped in the face by crispy pixels. This is a 3:2 ratio screen, same as the GBA. And we get pixel perfect 3x GBA integer scaling, which means that your GBA games are gonna look great. Perfect, really. And it's a flippy screen, like the GBA SP. Finally. Why? Why has it taken this long for the retro handheld industry to give us a 3:2 ratio pixel perfect GBA screen in the GBA SP form factor? If I was making handhelds, that's like the first thing I would do. Like, what were they even doing up until now? And the screen is gorgeous. I fired up the Miyoo Flip as I was testing just to compare how GBA looked, and I was expecting it to be crisper and sharper on the Flap Zizzle, and it was, but I had no idea how much duller and more washed out the screen on the Flip would be. I honestly was like, wait, has the screen on the Flip always looked this dull? Same thing with the Flip Zizzle. The screen on the Flap Zizzle is so much brighter and more saturated and just nicer. If you appreciate good GBA pixel art and want to see these games in the best way, this is it. It's worth it just for GBA alone. And the sound is there, I guess. It has sound. It sounds identical to the Flip Zizzle and the MEEEEEEE Flip and most retro handhelds really. It gets the job done, and there's a headphone hole which does work good. The system on the Flap Zizzle is pretty standard Amberlick stuff. You can browse your games and launch your games. You can make changes to RetroArch if you're into that and save the configuration. That works fine. I'm really looking forward to newly coming to this thing. Just for fun, I booted up the version for the RG34XX and that worked totally fine. Except a couple things didn't work. The lid closing didn't work and the analog sticks didn't work. Which makes sense since the RG34XX didn't have that stuff. We need to wait for the official version of that, which I'm sure will come along really soon, along with MuOS and MinUI, the usual suspects. Performance-wise, we're not going to get any surprises here. This is an H700 device, and we can expect the exact same performance here as on all the Amberlick XX devices, which means that you'll get everything up to PS1 and Nintendo DS, no problem. Everything before that, all the older stuff, no problem with that. And you'll be able to play most Dreamcast and N64 and PSP. Only the hardest games from those systems will give you problems. Most stuff will work totally fine. Same as the Flip Zizzle and all the rest of the family. I usually love 3:2 ratio devices because that's the middle ground ratio for a screen. 4:3 stuff will run with minimal black bars on the left and right, and 16:9 stuff will run with minimal black bars on the top and bottom, and 3:2 stuff will be full screen, obviously. However, the benefit to a 3:2 ratio screen is somewhat diminished when the device itself isn't built around that size, and that's kind of the case here. The Flap Zizzle is about the same size and shape as the MEEEEEEE Flip, and the MEEEEEEE Flip was built to be a 4:3 device. The Flap Zizzle screen is more or less the same width as the MEEEEEEE Flip, but it's vertically smaller, which means that your 4:3 stuff is going to be smaller on the Flap Zizzle. They somewhat mitigated this by including some nice presets and bezels, and the pixel density on the Flap Zizzle is higher, so the games look crisper and with better pixel scaling options, and the screen itself is brighter and more colorful. The actual games do look better here, but if the size of your image is more important to you than how they look, and you mostly want to play 4:3 stuff, then I'm going to say that the Flap Zizzle isn't going to satisfy you. But when it comes to what this screen is ideal for, 3:2 ratio stuff, Game Boy Advance. That's what we're really here for, right? I've said it before and I'll say it again right now because no one's gonna stop me. I'd like to see them try. The GBA is my favorite retro system. The GBA hardware and the library of games and the pixel art especially, this is the best of the golden era of retro games. I could happily spend the rest of my dweeby life emulating nothing but GBA. Just me and a warm mug of root beer and Final Fantasy Advance. That's how I want to die. And I gotta say, even though I have lots of devices that do really good GBA, the GBA SP nostalgia is so strong with this one. I think it's gonna be a hard one to top. There's something so authentic feeling about playing GBA on a flippy screen device, just like the GBA SP. It's pixel perfect GBA at 3x integer scaling, which means that in GBA, you're gonna get the crispest, cleanest possible image that you could ever get. And now we get that in the GBA SP form factor. And I'm glad that this exists for nerds like me who want that. Honestly, I didn't think I'd like the Flap Zizzle. When I first saw the photos, I was actually kind of disappointed. But honestly, when I opened it up, I felt a big rush of relief. It's not nearly as weird looking in person. And the amazing screen more than makes up for any gripes I had with the design of it. For GBA, if you want the SP form factor, the Flap Zizzle is the best there is. Now, let's be clear, it's good for other stuff, but it's not ideal. Don't buy this expecting it to replace your main MU doodad. This is a GBA machine first, everything else machine second. And if you already have a Flip Zizzle or a MEEEEEEE Flip and you're happy with it, honestly, just skip this one. It's not going to change your life. But if you're a GBA freak like me, chasing that perfect SP-ish dream handheld, this is your destiny. Embrace the Flap Zizzle and don't look back. And there's a link in the description if you want to grab one. And that brings us to the end. Let me know what you think of the Flap Zizzle. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you hate me? Leave your thoughts in the comments. That's it from me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.